System mapping. This presentation explains the system mapping step of the Horizons FORESIGHT method. Systems include a set of parts that interact to form a complex whole. Visualizing systems makes it easier to understand the various parts and their interrelationships. The main purpose of system mapping is to allow people to share their mental models to get a better understanding of the system under study and explore potential relationships and interactions. System maps do not represent the territory in its entirety, as they are a simplified conceptualization of reality used to help frame the FORESIGHT project. In this presentation, we will learn how to understand systems thinking and the use of system mapping in the FORESIGHT process, and when, how, and why system maps are used as part of the broader Horizons FORESIGHT method. This slide illustrates the evolution of how we visualize the system through the entire process. With each step, we are becoming more explicit, more careful, and more engaging and engaged in our thinking about the future. It starts as a mental model in our head. We develop a domain diagram to inform what is in and what is out of the scope of the study. Next, we try to develop a more detailed system map to better understand some of the underlying layers of the higher level domain map elements. And finally, the elements in the system map become the lenses through which we view the system in the scenarios. Systems thinking is one of the foundational skills in scanning and FORESIGHT. A system is defined as a set of parts, or elements, that interact to form a complex whole. Parts are often systems themselves, just as systems are generally parts of other systems. For example, the government, the human body, or a car. All parts of a system are related and are encapsulated within a boundary, as defined by an observer or group of observers. A system receives input from and sends output into the wider environment. A system can constantly be changing as certain parts evolve and impact other parts of the system. A system can be nested inside other systems. Systems thinking helps us better understand how systems are evolving and identifies areas of significant change that may alter systems and their component parts. Systems thinking is fundamentally different from traditional forms of analysis. Traditional analysis focuses on separating the individual pieces of what is being studied. Systems thinking focuses on how the individual pieces being studied interact with the other components of the system. It takes into account larger and larger numbers of interactions as an issue is being studied. As a result, systems thinking may result in strikingly different conclusions than traditional forms of analysis, especially when studying dynamically complex issues. What is a system map? A system map is a visual representation of the components of a system and their interrelationships. It generally shows the structure of the system under study, potentially with multiple levels. A system of systems. Horizons uses system maps in the FORESIGHT process to allow many different participants to share their mental models, create a simplification of reality to scope areas of importance, and understand the system under study, develop and test a shared analysis of how a system may behave or evolve under different assumptions. The parts, also referred to as nodes, elements, or components of a system, can be structures, processes, or functions, depending on the type and intention of the system map. We use 3 maps to help make sense of the system under study. We have seen a domain map before in the launch conference. A domain map is a good tool for mapping out and demonstrating the different components or issues in a domain or area of FORESIGHT research. It is a valuable first step of the research and scanning process, which helps us to get a sense of what the interesting issues and questions are that we may want to develop into the future. It is useful for identifying what's in and what's out of the scope of the FORESIGHT study. It's a good starting point for the development of more complex system maps. A domain map answers, what is this area? And what is in and what is out? There may be 30 to 50 stickies in this map. We covered stakeholder maps in the last 2 sessions. A stakeholder map answers, who should we talk to? Who matters? There may be 20 to 30 groups, organizations, or populations in this map, which may be high-graded to 5 to 7. A structural system map is a valuable first step in the FORESIGHT process. It shows us the essential elements in the system, and which are related, but not the direction of the relationship. It gives us a sense of how different elements in the structure could interact in the future. It helps us to get a sense of the interesting issues and questions that we may want to develop into the future. The structural system map answers, what are the structural elements in this system? This will help us visualize the system and identify how the system may change in the next 15 years. This is an example of a domain map from the Future of Asia Economy study. The following guidelines may be helpful in making system mapping a useful exercise. In order to be effective, you may need to generalize. Otherwise, system maps can get too complicated for the mind to grasp. It's best to let go of the detail while maintaining the essence. When generalizing, it is most effective to ensure that most elements of the system are at the same level of generalization. However, you can have different levels within the same system map. That is to say, a domain map will essentially be a system of systems which can themselves be broken down. It is often useful to focus on structures, processes, or functions. Although it depends on the purpose of the system map, it is best to try and think strategically and to identify what needs to be highlighted in order to ensure that the focus is on the right areas. Be flexible and ready to revise the system map as a greater understanding of what matters in the system is developed. Here is a great example of a simple system map. This is a structural system map from the Future of Asia Economy Study. The simple act of generating the map in a plenary session allows participants to understand each other's perspective of the system under study. It allows the group to frame the foresight work going forward so they're all beginning on the same page, with a better understanding of the system's internal processes and relationships. The system map here has 6 labels, 6 large chunks. We're looking for a system map with about this level of complexity. The elements of the structural system map correspond to make components of the system which will exist in all scenarios. The elements of the structural system map correspond to make components of the system which will exist in all scenarios. We often think of them as lenses through which we can highlight changes that are happening in the world. Therefore, you want to make your system map general and somewhat comprehensive. You may have to have more than one go at it. Even in the example above, nature of firms and character of value chains, which were originally separate boxes, have been packaged together. You may find yourself tinkering with your system map as you build out your scenarios. That's okay. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees. If your system map has 20 categories in it at first, that's okay. Cluster your chunks into subsystems that work with each other or that have more tightly related issues. Then label the chunks strategically. One of the tools you can use to generate these system maps are questions. For instance, when you're choosing insightful labels for groups of elements, you can ask, what are some of the key characteristics or dynamics that matter? For example, when looking at issues such as inequality, fundamentalism, and intolerance, rather than labeling them generally as social issues, perhaps label them more insightfully as social system stability. System mapping can happen before, after, and/or during scanning. Scanning helps to inform the system map and can also help refine it. Scanning helps in the discovering and sensing phase and is used to develop an initial domain map. This helps to frame the study and determine its scope. Continued scanning helps to create a growing understanding of the system and to make sense of the changes taking shape in the system. The domain map can then be reconfigured based on this new information. Once participants have a good understanding of the weak signals through scanning, they can start to create an initial system map by drawing connections between elements on the domain map. Deciding on what aspects of the system really matter for the study allows participants to finalize the system map, focusing largely on structures that may be experiencing significant change. The reason for creating a system map in a foresight exercise is to try to better understand the relationships and resulting behavioral outcomes between systems nodes. For example, system maps illustrate how and/or where change drivers or shocks impact different aspects of the system, what the pressures are on the system to adapt, and who or what is affected by changes. A system structure will determine how it behaves as a whole. It is important to recognize the impact of time delays. A change to one element of a system may not significantly impact the system immediately, but can do so at later stages. Some useful online mapping tools include Insight Maker, Visio, and SimpleMind. Kumu.io is a new addition that is very good. Microsoft Word and PowerPoint can also be used to create system maps, as well as our new friends Google Docs and Google Draw. Whiteboards are a good collaborative way to get an entire room to participate using post-it notes and markers, especially if exploring a domain for the first time, since it is very easy to change and revise in real time. If all else fails, simple pen and paper are useful tools.